I am a senior structural engineer. I spend my days analyzing stress points, load-bearing walls, and the hidden cracks in skyscrapers that no one else sees. Until it's too late. I know exactly how much pressure a beam can take before it snaps. I know that if the foundation is compromised, the most beautiful house in the world is nothing more than a pile of future rubble. I should have applied that same logic to my mother. My mother, let's call her the architect of her own ruin, believed that family was a one-way street. To her, I wasn't a daughter, I was a structural support. I was the one who paid for the roof repairs, the one who covered the property taxes, and the one who ensured the golden child, my younger brother, Leo, never had to face the consequences of his own gravity. The snap happened 5 years ago. Leo wanted to start a luxury car rental business. No business plan, no market research, just a desire to drive Ferraris on someone else's dime. He needed $80,000 to secure the first fleet. My mother called me on a Tuesday, I remember, because I was on a construction site, the smell of wet concrete and diesel heavy in the air. He just needs a start, she said, her voice dripping with that rehearsed warmth she only used when the vending machine was needed. You're making so much now. With the firm, what's 80,000 to you? It's for your brother. It's a bad investment, Mom, I said, my voice level, as I watched a crane lift a steel girder. The numbers don't hold. He has no experience. I won't fund it. Collapse. The warmth evaporated instantly. The structural integrity of our relationship didn't just crack, it disintegrated. You've always been cold, she hissed. You've always loved your blueprints more than your blood. If you won't help your brother, if you're going to be this selfish, then I don't have a daughter. You're not mine anymore. Don't call. Don't come by. You're dead to me. I stood there, the wind whipping my safety vest, and I felt a strange cold clarity. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I simply recalibrated. Understood, I said. The silence lasted 5 years. In those 5 years, I moved from senior engineer to partner at my firm. I bought a penthouse with floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the city I helped build. I went to therapy with a woman named Dr. Eris who helped me realize that I wasn't a cold person. I was simply a person who had stopped allowing herself to be a load-bearing wall for people who refused to stand on their own. I watched from a distance as Leo's business folded in 8 months. I watched as my mother mortgaged her house, the house I had paid off for her 10 years ago, to save him. I watched as the golden child drained every cent of her retirement. And then, inevitably, I watched as the bank moved in. I didn't step in. I didn't fix it. I did something much more calculated. I set up a shell company, Foundation Holdings LLC. Through that company, I quietly bought the debt of my mother's house when it went into foreclosure. I didn't want the house. I wanted the ledger. I wanted to be the one who owned the ground she stood on, even if she didn't know it yet. Welcome to the revenge diary. If you've ever been disowned for setting a boundary, if you've ever been told you're dead because you stopped being a bank account, this story is for you. Drop a comment and hit subscribe because the foundation is about to shift. 3 weeks ago, my phone buzzed, a number I hadn't seen in half a decade. I have nowhere else to go, the voice on the other end whispered. It didn't sound like the woman who had disowned me. It sounded like a structure that had finally reached its breaking point. I took a sip of my sparkling water, looked out at the city skyline, and smiled. I'll be at the diner on 4th Street at 6:00 p.m., I said. Bring your suitcases. I've already decided where you're going to stay. The diner on 4th Street is a relic of another era, greasy vinyl booths, the smell of burnt coffee, and fluorescent lights that make everyone look like they're under interrogation. I chose it on purpose. It was a place devoid of the luxury my mother felt entitled to. I arrived 10 minutes early. I was wearing my charcoal gray power suit, the one I wore to city council hearings when I needed to look unshakable. I sat in a corner booth, a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lemon in front of me. And I opened my laptop. I wasn't working. I was reviewing the final foreclosure documents for her house. Foundation Holdings, LLC, now officially owned the deed. My mother was effectively a tenant in a home she thought she'd lost to a faceless bank. At 5 p.m., the bells above the door chimed. She looked older. The 5 years hadn't been kind to her. The entitlement was still there, etched into the lines around her mouth, but it was draped in a thin veil of desperation. She was carrying 2 worn suitcases, the same ones she'd used when she kicked me out of the family group chat 5 years ago. Behind her, dragging his feet like a sullen teenager, was Leo. He was 30 years old and still wore the expression of someone who expected the world to apologize for being difficult. They spotted me and walked over. "No, I'm sorry. No, it's good to see you. This place is a dump," Leo muttered as he slid into the booth next to my mother. I didn't look up from my screen. "The coffee is hot and the booth is paid for. If you'd prefer a 5-star lobby, I suggest you find the funds for one." My mother winced. She reached across the table, her hand trembling slightly, trying to touch mine. I pulled my hand back and picked up my water. "We're in trouble, sweetheart," she said, her voice cracking. "The bank took everything, Leo's business. It was just bad luck. A market shift. If we could just stay with you for a few months, just until we get back on our feet." "Back on your feet?" I asked, finally closing my laptop and looking her directly in the eyes. "Mom, you told me I wasn't your daughter anymore. You told me I was dead to you because I wouldn't fund Leo's Ferrari collection. What changed?" I was upset. She snapped, the old fire flickering for a second before the desperation doused it. "Family says things they don't mean when they're stressed. You're my daughter. You can't just let us sleep on the street." "Actually, I can," I said quietly. Leo let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "See, Mom, I told you she was still a cold-hearted bee." "Leo," I interrupted, my voice as sharp as a structural beam. "If you finish that sentence, you'll be sleeping on the sidewalk before the waitress brings your menus. I am the only person standing between you and a homeless shelter. Recalibrate your tone." He shut his mouth, but the resentment in his eyes was a wildfire. "I have a place for you," I continued, looking back at my mother. "I bought a small 2-bedroom apartment near the industrial district. It's clean, it's safe, and the rent is already handled." My mother's face lit up. "Oh, thank heaven. I knew you wouldn't let us down. I'll need a larger closet, of course, and Leo needs a separate office for his new ventures." "It's 1 bedroom and a small den," I said. "And there are conditions." "Conditions?" Leo groaned. "What is this, a lease?" "Exactly," I said, pulling a 2-page document from my briefcase. "You will both sign this. Rule 1, no guests. Rule 2, Leo must have a full-time job within 30 days, and no, CEO of a startup does not count. Rule 3, you will never ask me for a single cent again. If you break these rules, the eviction notice is already signed and dated." My mother stared at the paper. This is so cold, Diana. We're your family." "No," I said, leaning forward. "You are people who disowned me when the vending machine broke. Now the machine is under new management. Sign it or take your suitcases and leave." They signed. They didn't have a choice. The golden child and the architect had run out of ground to stand on. I handed them the keys. But I didn't tell them that the apartment was in a building I also owned through Foundation Holdings. I didn't tell them that I had installed a smart meter on the utilities so I could see exactly how much of my generosity they were wasting. And I certainly didn't tell them about the house. "Go to the apartment," I said, standing up. "The address is on the lease. I have a meeting." "Wait," my mother said as I turned to leave. "What about my house?" The bank said someone bought the debt. Do you think you could find out who it is? Maybe they'd let us buy it back later." I looked at her, the woman who had traded my love for Leo's greed. "I already know who bought it, Mom," I said with a calm, piercing smile. "And, trust me, they have no intention of ever letting you back inside." I walked out of the diner. The cool night air felt like a victory. I sat in my car and watched them through the window. 2 broken people staring at a set of keys to a life they never thought they'd be living. He thought he'd replaced me. She thought she'd disowned me. They both forgot that I am an engineer. I don't just build things. I know exactly how to tear them down when the foundation is rotten. In structural engineering, There is a concept called creep. It's a slow, progressive deformation of a material under constant mechanical stress. It doesn't happen all at once. It's a series of microscopic shifts that eventually lead to a catastrophic failure. I watched the creep in the apartment I had provided for my mother and Leo. I didn't visit them. I didn't need to. I monitored them through the data. I saw the utility bills, spikes in electricity at 3:00 a.m. that suggested Leo wasn't sleeping, but likely running some mining, rig, or another doomed digital venture. I saw the neighbors' reports of unauthorized guests, the very first rule they had signed. They thought I was the same woman I had been 5 years ago. They thought I was the fixer who would eventually soften, the one who would see their struggle and offer a larger house, a better car, a fresh investment for Leo. They didn't realize that I was no longer maintaining their structure. I was simply auditing its collapse. The breaking point arrived exactly 42 days into the lease. My phone alerted me to a localized, seismic shift in my professional life. A local notary, a woman my firm had worked with for years, called me. "I have a young man here, a Leo," she said, her voice hesitant. "He's trying to authorize a lien release document for a property held by Foundation Holdings, LLC. He has a letter of intent with your professional engineering seal on it." It looked off. I felt a cold, familiar stillness settle in my veins. Leo hadn't just broken the lease. He had committed a felony. He had stolen my professional seal from my home office during a brief drop-off of groceries a week earlier. He was trying to release the debt on the family house, the house I secretly owned, to sell it and fund yet another startup. He was trying to sell the ground out from under me, using my own name. "Hold the documents," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "And call the police. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But I didn't go to the notary. I went to the family house, the one Foundation Holdings had spent the last month quietly renovating. I arrived and opened the front door with my key. The house no longer smelled like my mother's expensive perfumes or Leo's stale gym clothes. It smelled like fresh cedar, white paint, and victory. I sat at the mahogany dining table, the one I had bought to replace the one they'd lost, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 10 minutes later, my mother's sedan pulled into the driveway. She and Leo burst through the front door, looking frantic. They hadn't expected the door to be unlocked. They hadn't expected the lights to be on, and they certainly hadn't expected me. "Diana," my mother gasped, clutching her chest. "What are you doing here? This house, it's locked. We were just coming to see if the new owners were here." Leo stood behind her, his face pale, his hands shaking. He knew the notary had called. "The new owner is here, Mom," I said, gestured to the room around me. "You're looking at her." The silence that followed was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a building's total structural failure. "You," my mother whispered. "You bought the house. You've had it this whole time, while we were living in that cage in the industrial district." "It wasn't a cage," I said, standing up. "It was a shelter, one you didn't earn and one you just lost. I am the owner of Foundation Holdings. I am the person who paid the debt you couldn't handle. And Leo, I am also the person who just filed a report for the theft of a professional engineering seal and attempted fraud." Leo's knees buckled. "Diana, please. I was just trying to help Mom. I was going to give her the money." "You were going to steal from the only person who hasn't abandoned you," I said, walking toward him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough. "You thought because I was family, my boundaries were just suggestions. You thought my integrity had a price tag." I turned to my mother. 5 years ago, you told me I wasn't your daughter anymore because I wouldn't fund a lie. You traded a daughter for a golden child who just tried to put you in prison along with him. How does the investment look now, Mom?" She started to cry. That same performative, loud sobbing I had spent 30 years trying to quiet with my checkbook. But this time the sound didn't move me. It was just noise. "You're a monster," she sobbed. "To do this to your own mother, to trap us like this." "I didn't trap you," I said, picking up my briefcase. "I gave you a lease, you broke it. I gave you a chance. You tried to forge my name. You trapped yourselves. I am just the engineer recording the failure." The police arrived 5 minutes later. I watched from the porch as they took Leo away. I watched as my mother sat on the steps of the house she no longer owned, surrounded by the suitcases she had lived out of for 5 years. "Where am I supposed to go?" she wailed as the cruiser drove off. "The lease is terminated," I said, looking down at her. "There is a motel 3 miles down the road. It's within your remaining budget. After that, you'll have to find a new load-bearing wall because this one is retired." I didn't stay to watch her leave. I walked to my car, drove to my penthouse, and poured a glass of sparkling water. Some people say that blood is thicker than water.